Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I am Andrea Andrade from Open Expo Europe, team. Today we receive Kevin McGrail, Principal Evangelist at Ditto and member of the Apache Software Foundation. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for staying here with us. And so today with Kevin, we are going to talk about using the open source Gam to administer Google Workspace. And just before starting, just remind you to the public that you can ask your questions by the chat during the webinar, and we will asking to Kevin at the end of the conference. So thank you so much to be here today with us. And okay, Kevin, you can share your screen and start the webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Well, today's presentation isn't too slide heavy, but we'll go ahead and get started with some of the slides here. So as Andrea said, today we're looking at an open source tool. It's called Gam. It's a really great, amazing tool to administer Google Workspace. So a little bit about me. So as she mentioned, I am a member of the Apache Software Foundation. I'm also the principal evangelist at Ditto. And Gam was invented at Ditto. Jay Lee was the inventor of it. But additionally to that, I love helping people with Google tools and what they're doing. So I'm a Google G Suite top contributor, also a developer expert and an ambassador, though I think the ambassador program is getting shut down. But other than that, I also work as a U.S. Marine Corps Cyber Auxiliary member. So cybersecurity is something I love doing, and tools like Gam can really help secure your installations. And last time I spoke at Open Expo, I believe my speech was on using open source tools to secure systems and to perform cybersecurity stuff. So this kind of continues that concept, improved automation, improved offboarding, because offboarding is really one of the biggest risks that happens when you're in your organization. So that's enough about me, but the question I'll start off with is, what is Wysiwyg? So unfortunately, I don't think we have an interactive capability here, but the answer to that is it stands for what you see is what you get. And if you know that, you're getting old like me. But the key things that we'll be talking to today is we'll be talking about CLI or CLI versus GUI or GUI. And the main difference there is that command line interface versus graphical user interface. So when you're at a command prompt or you're at a terminal screen, that's command line. When you're using the mouse and you're clicking on things and dragging things, that's GUI. They are both amazing, but a lot of people don't realize the power that using the command line interface can give them, especially to do things that are automated, need to be automated, or bulk operations. And that's really where we come into Google Apps Manager, or what is known as Gam. So a little bit of history on it. What is Gam? So it is a command line program, and it helps simplify the management of your Google Workspace installations. It uses Google's APIs to perform everything it's doing. So if Google doesn't have an API for it, it can't do it. Pretty important too as well, there are things that you can't do with the APIs. So this does not replace the administrative panel in Google. As I mentioned down here, the important stuff, you can't create and delete OUs. You can create and delete OUs, but you can't manage them or disable a service for an OU with Gam. But other than that, it is an open source project. It is licensed under the ASL v2, and it is what I refer to as the Swiss Army tool of Google Workspace Administrator. So if you're working with a domain on Google Workspace, you need to use Gam. And a lot of people have problems with Gam. So, but we'll talk about that for the installation and whatnot, but a little bit more history. So why is it called Gam is a big thing. So Gmail was, of course, Google's first mail product. That then led to what was known as Gmail for your domain. So you could get Gmail for your domain. That then got renamed to Google Apps. That later, I think in 2016, got renamed to Google G Suite. And then just last year got renamed to Google Workspace. So theoretically, if Gam was renamed and kept up with all this, it would now be called, Google Workspace Manager. But it isn't, and so it's just known as Gam. Gam was originally written by a gentleman named Jay Lee. Great product, still maintains his version of it as well. We'll talk about that. But he also writes another program called Got Your Back as well. Great tools. He has left Ditto and now works for Google and maintains everything. But A long time ago, back in 2013, a gentleman named Ross Scroggs started using the Gam tool. He started needing some extra features to it, and so today we're talking about the version from Ross, which is known as Gam ADV-XTD3, and really that is a fork that's maintained by Ross. So Ross is a entrepreneur and a programmer. He started programming quite a long time ago, back in the 70s, and he sold his own computer company, and since then he really has been working on helping and volunteering, especially in schools, with their technology. And so he installed Google Apps for Education, and now that's Google Workspace for Education at 4 schools, and he quickly discovered that managing it was not very efficient. So as I mentioned, 2013, he found Gam with Jay Lee. He started talking to him, helping him with bug fixes, and really just they work almost in parallel on the 2 different versions. So, but that kind of leads to the question of why Gam ADV XTD3. So to have more freedom with Gam, Ross forked it, is what we call it. So a fork is totally fine. ASL v2, we love forks at the Apache Software Foundation. This is the reason the licensing exists. We want code out there so that people can use it and do what they want with it. That is one of the major freedoms that open source software gives you. And the licensing from ASL v2 is very clear on that. Ross necessarily couldn't call it the same thing, but he had permission from Jay to call it the other one. So originally he called it Gam Advanced, or ADV. That continued to support Jay and the original Gam. But as it came through, he had multiple branches. In fact, Ross can't even remember what all the branches were. He had X's and Y's and other versions that were out there, but he didn't remember. So he lost track of all the branches and the reasons. But when Google Drive API version 3 of that API was released, that got the 3 onto the name. Additionally, when Team Drive support, which is now called Shared Drives, got released, he created the Gam Gam ADV-XTD. And when Python 3 was added to it, he added the 3 to the name. And so, long story short, we end up with Gam Advanced-XTD3. So branch X, Team Drive support running on Python 3. So anyway, kind of a little bit of history into Gam and why it exists, and really this grew organically out of needing to help administer domains. And in my opinion, the best tools come out of those type of situations. So I was going to do a live demo of installing, using, and upgrading a Gam. I'm still going to do one, but we're going to do it in a different order. So as you can see in that little screenshot, you maybe can't see it, but it says that Windows is installing updates, and it's at 23 or 24%. So that was 2 hours of waiting for my my test box that I was all set up for this. It started automatically installing a Windows update, and so it's not available. So we're going to use a live system instead. So let me go ahead and make it so that you guys can see my screen. We're going to go through a document. Now, throughout this, nobody here has to do any type of writing down notes or anything like that. Everything is documented. Later on, I'll show you my LinkedIn. I love talking to people on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in getting an early copy of the documentation, just let me know and I'll send it to you. We're going to be writing a blog post about it to really help people install it, because that's probably the biggest problem. But let's go do some live work with it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that. So you guys should be seeing me. Let me go ahead and do share screen. Let's go ahead and get some documents up. And we're going to start with some of these other tools. So let's just jump down. So this work, a lot of thanks is owed to Ross and of course to Jay Lee for this original work. But the key thing that we did is back last year in December, and then following up in January, I interviewed Ross and really dealt with what was the biggest problems that people have, which is getting Google Apps Manager installed and working. So right now you guys can see my command line. I'll have Google Apps Manager installed. So let's kind of take a look at this in a reverse situation. So over here you can see the documentation we have. So how to upgrade Gam, for example, is one of the questions. And when there's a new version released, you can just install it over top of the old version, and the Gam updates page will tell you if there's additional steps required. But the nice part is, if you want, you can actually use the product itself to see if there's a new version. So I can go ahead and go, and it's Gam Version Check, and that's going to go ahead and run and see if there is a new version. And you can see up here that it comes back and says, 53101. So current is 53101 and latest is 53109. So there is a new version. Interestingly, though, the first time you run this, by the way, you will get a warning that tells you a new version is available. Subsequent versions, you'll notice it doesn't get that. But let's go into some of the things here, and then we'll break my installation of Gam, and we'll see if we can get it running on a new installation. So we've got a whole bunch of instructions about how to do that. But let's go down to some of the use cases. So up here, Gam use cases. A lot of Gam is all about doing things like interacting with spreadsheets, interacting with comma-separated values, and doing things in bulk. That's really where Gam shines. But you can also do some simpler things. So for example, on this domain, I can do Gam info user, and I can type in my username, and I can see some information here. So in here, you can see, name and address and, various stuff. Am I a super user, etc. Unique ID. You can see my license that's on here. You can see the groups I belong to as well. So, let's do some other things. So Gam info group, and let's do advisors at documentshare.com. And we can get information on the groups. So in here, we can find out, all the permissions of who can do stuff, as well as the fact of find out who are the members of the group. So if you've ever used the Google admin interface, this kind of stuff can be fairly frustrating on how long it takes. So I'm going to go into the admin panel, and I'm going to show you just some of the small frustrations that occur with this type of issue. So in here, for example, let's say you're in the groups, so you're clicking, you're waiting. Okay, I want to get the, what did I do? Sales at, so that's this one here. And then you got to click on, okay, direct members. And then you got, so if you want this, and if you want to just like cut and paste, oh wait, we can't really get that easily. You can download this and export it, but it's just a lot of clicks to get things. Additionally, there's some kind of silly things in Google search. I make fun of this because Google is a search company. So, but like, for example, if you search for users, you can't get users. You search for groups, for example, you don't get groups. You have to actually click back to the home dashboard, and then you can click on users or groups. So certain things aren't in the search. Additionally, like for example, I named one of the groups testing 1, 2, 3. So for example, if I search for testing 1, 2, 3, it does not work. If I search for sales at document share, you can see it comes up that testing 1, 2, 3. So unfortunately, certain things like the group name are not actually editable or not actually searchable. The email address for the group name is what you can search on. So with Gam, you can work around those type of issues and come out with things a little better. Some of the other examples that, for example, we can show, we could update that group probably and change the name of the group. So let's see if I can remember the particular information. So the description. So where is testing 1, 2, 3 on this? Is it in this output? Sorry, I don't see. Oh, I did advisors. Let me do sales at. I think it's the description is what it's called. It's not really the name, which is why it doesn't really search the description. Nope, it is the name. So, but the thing. So let's see if we can do an update here. So Gam update group sales at documentshare.com, and let's go ahead and do. It would just be name, and then let's put in the name. Let's just call it sales. And we can see that the group sales was updated. We can go ahead and go back to our panel here. We can go ahead and go back to the home just to refresh this the easiest. Go into groups, and we can see that sales is now called sales instead of testing 1, 2, 3. A lot of really great capabilities like that that you can do on the command line, loop through things, make changes, disable accounts, things like that. So for example, some of the top use cases that are here with Gam are things like the ability to maintain a group. So in this particular case, as I mentioned, he helps with schools. So he creates a group called middle school. And then obviously at a school, every year the kids change. And so they have all the students in class of 2021, 2022, and class of 2023. They put those into organizational units. And then he can use this particular sync command to change this group to have all the members of these OUs be in that group. If you were to try to do that manually, I don't even know how long it would take you. If you have hundreds, if not, dozens of students, you'd have to export the OU, clean it up, and then I guess cut and paste it into the subscribe fields. But there are some things you can do in Gam that are not in the admin console. As we talked about before, there are things that that are in the admin console you can't do in Gam, but there's also vice versa. So like, for example, one of the ones, let's say you're looking for a presentation and you want to know where it's stored. This is a great way. This searches every single user on the domain. It's going to find 24 users. It's going to grind through each of those 24 users. As you can see, it's not that slow. If you had thousands of users, it could take time, but it's all designed to run in the background and do this. And then we get a list of all the presentations that are on this drive as well. So a great way to find certain files. You could then output that to a CSV. You could bring it into Google Sheets, do more manipulation on it, and try and get what's going on. Additionally, like for example, a lot of people want to know how many files they have and what's the total size and shared drives. You can't do that in Google. So there's another section that's called Gam scripts. That you can go look at. So for example, there's one called Get Team Drive Count Size. This takes a long time to run, so I won't run it on today's meeting. Additionally, you can do things like, if you want to find out files that are shared externally, there's, get shared with user drive ACLs. So access control list is what ACL stands for. And additionally, like, for example, on document share, we use the Google identity. And so because we use Google identity, we don't automatically assign licenses. So we can use Gam to go ahead and add licenses. As you can see, you'll notice, for example, there's some neat tricks on here. So they're redirecting standard out to a log file, so you can look at it later. Multi-process, redirect, standard error, standard out, and then look at a CSV for add licenses, Gam user, and the email address, add license, and then you have to replace SKU ID with the SKU ID of the particular SKU you want to give that license for. There's tons of help in here. So like, for example, if I type a command wrong, so I'm going to type in wiser, so that'll just be spelled wrong, it will point you towards where the help's at. So for example, syntax is in file c:/programs gam commands.txt. And then there's a wiki as well that you can go view. There's tons of resources that I will have at the end of this slide deck. And again, you don't have to write down these notes. If you want the slide deck, if you want the documentation we're going to go over, it's there. So we've showed you a little bit about some of the commands you can do. We've showed you a little bit about the ability to upgrade, find out if there's an upgrade, and upgrades are pretty straightforward. You just install the new version over top. So now let's show you the installation. So the installation, I think Gam is pretty straightforward to install, but it does have some issues. So the first thing we're going to start off with is you do have to be a superadmin. It can be a little more nuanced than that, where you could be an admin for the account with the right API scopes. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to go just with the fact that you need to be a super admin. Additionally, you can do some neat things. You can have like multiple versions of Gam. You can give different scopes. So for example, you can install Gam with just the scopes needed to manage groups. And so an administrator could have just that capability. So you don't have to do anything more fine-grained than what you can do in the Google Apps Workspace, administrative console and what access are there. So as I mentioned, you can delegate those capabilities, but Gam is very, very powerful. There isn't a whole lot of prompts, yes or no. You can delete users. You can do a lot of damage. So if you're not comfortable with Gam, please don't install it and play with it. But if you're starting to go to the next thing, you have a sandbox, you want to know how to install it, you can go from there. So what Ross does is he provides an executable installation. The code is written in Python, so you could readily install it on other operating systems and use that as a source. But basically, what we're going to do is, you can see there's Linux Mac OS. So, basically you can run the tar file and install it, or just do a fetch. So for example, this command here, we'll go ahead and install it and get ready to go. And you can find what the current version is from the download website. Otherwise, first-time Gam users on Windows will need to download the MSI and run the executable and follow the prompts. And basically, depending on the version that goes on, you search for an appropriate installation. So we're going to go ahead and do a couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to go to my installation. I'm going to rename in my user directory .gam to .gam old. And so that takes my configuration away. Additionally, I'm going to do add programs, and I'm going to remove Gam Advanced off of my machine. And once this is gone, theoretically, we have a clean install. So fingers crossed we can do a nice live demo. There is a phrase that says, never work with pets, children, or do a live demo that I usually follow very carefully. But unfortunately today, as I showed you, my test box that I had rigged up for this decided to do updates, so it wasn't going to be ready. So at this point now, we have Gam off the machine. I can't run the command anymore. It says it's not recognized. So let's go ahead and run some information here. So in Gam, so 53109 is the latest version. The instructions tell us what we need to do. So go to the GitHub release page and search for an appropriate architecture installation asset. For the blog, we're using the 64-bit architecture, so we will download this particular version. So let's go ahead and look for 64_MSI. Or 64.msi, yeah, 64.msi, excuse me. So here we have Gam Advanced 531 Windows x86. So let's go ahead and download this. And what we're going to do next is the Windows version will not prompt you to create a project. So there's a whole lot of steps you got to follow. And additionally, you'll find things like Microsoft Defender will trigger on Gam. Additionally, you might have to change some things. So you'll see, like, for example, this is what a screen looks like. We'll show you that in a minute, where Windows has blocked it. You might have to change things in your Windows installation to allow this to run. Additionally, Symantec will flag on it. So I have Symantec endpoint on this machine, and it comes up and just says it's inconclusive and whatnot. The source code is there, so if you don't trust it, you can go ahead and look at this. But this is part of the main process. So let's go ahead and run the script, or run the installation. So as we saw before, we have the more info, and we're going to go ahead, and it's an unknown publisher is why it's coming up with this. So we're going to go ahead and say run anyway. We might or might not get download insights. So this is what exactly I was mentioning. So Symantec has popped up. So I'm going to go ahead and say allow this file. And I'm going to say, you should only allow files that are safe. I do trust ROS. So this is okay to run. And now we have this screen right here. So what we're going to do there, you have to basically accept the terms and conditions, things like that. The terms and conditions are pretty standard. They just basically tell you it's licensed under ASL v2. I encourage you to read it, but it is open source projects, so it's use at your own risk and whatnot. But we're going to go ahead and hit next. We're going to go ahead, we're going to install to a slightly different place. I like to install in program files rather than right off the root of my hard drive. So I'm going to hit next, and I'm going to hit install. And at this point, basically, we are done with that part. So as I mentioned, the unknown publisher warning, the Windows environment, and we can also see that the path will be automatically added to the machine. So if I run Gam, it is in the path. So we are running okay. At this point now, we have completed the setup, and we need to do the configuration. So ROS, again, has really made this pretty straightforward. There's a lot of complication here, but I've tried to lay it out. And as I mentioned, this blog will be available for you to look at in detail, and you can go through it. So as we mentioned, you have to be a Google admin, probably a super admin. You have to have permissions on the workspace domain to create projects. And occasionally we do see people that don't have those permissions. It's rare, but it does happen. And you have to be able to log into admin.google.com. So we're going to go ahead and do this for a different domain than the one we did before, just to make sure it's correct. So with the Gam executable, run the command Gam create project. So we can go over here and do Gam create project. Now, one of the things I'm going to mention during this video, I will be showing some authentication keys. Those authentication keys are sensitive. They would give people very powerful commands to this domain, possibly from the video. So we'll be deleting them afterwards. So you do have to be careful about some of this information. So, all right, so let's do Gam create project and follow the prompts. All right, what do we get? Enter your Google Workspace admin or GCP project manager email address authorized to manage projects. All right, so we're going to use a different one. Let's go ahead and show you that domain. So the foundation that I run, McGrail Foundation, we're going to use that domain. And thank you to Google for donating this to us. I hope I already got that. So first of all, I can log into Google admin, made sure that works. Additionally, I can go to my email address over here, and I can see that my email address is kevin.mcgrail@mcgrail.com, just in case I don't happen to know it. So over here, I'm going to do kevin.mcgrail@mcgrail.com. And if we don't get through finishing this, I do apologize, but as I mentioned, we do have a pretty good walkthrough of exactly how to do it. And this is the hardest part. The installation is really the hardest part. After that, there's a great community of people that use Gam. You can talk to people about it. You can say, oh, I'm trying to do this. Ross is very helpful. As I mentioned, there's a scripts page. There's probably, I don't know, over 100 scripts on there with different use case scenarios, all real world, all cookbook recipes that you can look at that solve problems that you'll deal with as a Google administrator. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, now it's going to launch my browser. I'm going to tell you it's going to launch the wrong browser here, and that's okay. So we're going to go ahead and cut and paste this over here. And we're going to cut and paste it to the McGrail.com one over here. This is just because I have multiple browsers and I have multiple browsers on the machine, multiple profiles in Chrome as well, and I use the different ones for different things. So basically, it will try and launch this. If your installation is simpler, you want it to do this. But basically, right here, it just basically says the Gam project wants to access your account. It will allow you to view and manage your data across Google. So you have to accept all this. So we're going to click Allow, and we're going to go back to here. This will automatically create a randomly named project, etc. Once you allow the Gam to continue, Gam will continue with the project creation, authorizing the APIs and more. So over here, you can see that it's going ahead and authorizing the APIs. Now, one of the bad parts for doing a live demo is, and one of the reasons I showed you it working before we went to this standpoint, is that you do need about 15 minutes sometimes to let these APIs just work through Google's system. So it doesn't always take effect right away. At that point, the output of Gam will give you a URL, and you have to manually open the browser to that URL to set up Gam and create the OAuth client ID. So basically, at this point, as I mentioned, you have to read the requirements of the Gam installation. You want to choose desktop app or other. You want to enter Gam or other desired value for the name, and you want to click the blue create button. So let's go ahead and see if it finished. It did. So we're going to go ahead and do some cutting and pasting over here. We're going to mark this right here, and we're going to go ahead and go to our browser right here. We're going to go ahead and load that prompt up. And Ross, again, has made this very, very straightforward. So up here, we're going to select, as you remember, it was desktop type. We have to enter Gam or other desired name for the thing. So this is going to be Gam demo for Open Expo. There's a good name. And we're going to go down here and we're going to click create. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us an OAuth string. And this is pretty dangerous. As I mentioned, you have secret information and things like that. So I probably don't want this information available on the web. So I will, as I mentioned, I will kill this OAuth after it's done. But I've gone ahead and copied that secret and that ID over here just so I have them in a scratch pad for the next steps. So right here, I have to enter the client ID. So that's this long string right here. And let's do paste. Go back to your client and copy the secret value. So as I mentioned, I did this just so I would have it more handy. Edit, paste, and we hit that. So now we can go back to the thing, click OK to close, and that's it. The Gam project is created. So over here, you can see we have the Gam demo for Open Expo, so I can very quickly go in and delete that OAuth client later on today. as soon as this meeting is over, actually. So now that that's done, as I mentioned, you will have two files. They'll be in that home kmcgrail.gam file directory, excuse me, that you saw me rename earlier. You'll have your client secrets. You'll have your OAuth 2. The next thing that you have to do is you have to configure your API access for it. There's two modes in the access the APIs for different use cases. One is to manage things as a system administrator, and the other is to use the user's resources as acting as a user. So that's what we call a service account. So you have to set up both modes. Most typical use cases, you're going to want both. So in this particular case, it's going to use those files to do it. So we're just going to go ahead and do Gam OAuth create. So Gam OAuth create. And it will go ahead and read those directories. As I mentioned, sometimes there are issues with this going through the system. So if this bombs out, sometimes you just have to wait 15 minutes. And you have to go through the various different scopes that you want to have. And the default is highly recommended for most installations. There are some, like for example, if you're a Google reseller, you might want to turn on the reseller's API. But we're going to go ahead and leave it with the current scopes. So we're going to go ahead and just hit continue. And we have to enter our email admin address. So that's kevin.mcgrail@mcgrail.com. And it's going to open the browser. As I mentioned before, this is going to launch the wrong browser and in the wrong profile. So we'll go ahead and put this over here. And it asks me to sign in. And then it's going to ask a whole bunch of things. And, you know, as you can see in the document, I just put a cut in there to show that there's lots. So you can limit the scope for Gam at this step, and by modifying the client secrets, you can just, for example, change it to just, 2 squiggly braces because the scopes can't be expanded. There's a whole bunch of information about if you want to do this, if you want to configure limited access. But for the purposes of this, we are not worrying about limited access. We are giving the keys to the castle, and we have gone ahead and accepted that. So that's mode 2, very straightforward, very simple to do. The next thing we need to do is we need to authorize a service account. So we need to basically run this command here with the same account that we've been using. So we're going to go ahead and run Gam user kevin.mcgrail@mcgrail.com update service account. And here it's going to ask us for more scopes as well. And you can then check that everything's good to go. As I mentioned, you do have some delays, the back-end processes. So if this blows up, I wouldn't necessarily be, surprised. Again, the default is highly recommended. So we're just going to go ahead and hit continue. And at this point, you're going to see it go through all the things. You're going to see it put down the specific issues here, and you can see that various ones of these have failed on the particular the particular thing. So this is somewhat to be expected because the particular we haven't waited the 15 minutes here. So I can go ahead and do check, for example, and we can see if these have their proper permissions. And they're currently all failing. So we'll go ahead and try again to do an update. And if we run out of time during this process, we'll go ahead and take Q&A and then maybe come back and check on it beforehand. So we're just going to go ahead and hit continue. And it's still failing. So again, for the most part, you do have to wait. And eventually what you'll see is something similar to this, where you'll get all these passes, 1 out of 19, and you're all in good shape. So as I mentioned, you can install Gam on multiple machines. You only need one project. You can copy the authorization files to multiple machines. And so great information on the blog about how to use that with multiple computers. So let me go ahead and go back to my slide deck here, if I can find it. Just got to figure out where I put it. Here it is. So what we've done, we showed a little bit about its use. We showed a little bit about its upgrade. We're working through the install. We're actually very, very close. As soon as we can get that service account done, it would be working. Right now, patience is a virtue. And what we would be doing is just waiting 15 minutes, running the command again, and it will likely work. So some of the other things that I have in the slide deck is a lot of resources. So the Gam Advanced Project homepage is here. The original Gam homepage is here. Those scripts that I told you about are here. So, for example, you can see just tons and tons of scripts that are up here about all the particular things that are there, and converting groups, and I don't even know what all of these do. Delete old contacts, for example. So if you're looking for particular solutions, they're here. You can download them. You can look at the source code. You can customize them for your particular needs. You can look for all kinds of information that Gam can automate. You can do bulk commands as well. And again, I've lost my slide. There it is. There's also other people's contributions. So there's another resources section. There's a group that you can belong to if you want to discuss how to use it. And finally, you can view the Gam updates, as we mentioned, when there are new versions. So I will get to questions and we'll check on that other thing, but I am on LinkedIn. You can find me under the username K McGrail. You'll see that my avatar is a can of Spam. That's an off-brand Canadian brand called Gam. That's not Photoshop. That's a real product, but it's my initials, and it's how many people just call me Cam. But please reach out to me there. I love talking to people on social media. If you're interested in these, in this slide deck, if you're interested in the blog, I can send you the draft, as I mentioned. You'll have all the information. You can get onto installing Gam, using it on your particular installation, and whatnot. So, Andrea, I will go back to the thing, but do we have any questions?
Hi, Kevin.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin.
So it is still failing, so I won't be able to show you it working on this particular thing. So in particular, that's not a big deal. And so it might be a question of I might actually need to go authorize this. I could have missed a step. I'm sorry. I think I was trying to do too many things at once. So let me go in here. Are we on the right thing? We're not on the right browser. Let's go over here. I think I have to click the authorize button. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
Yes. Yes. Tell me.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. We have two questions from the same person. Okay. His name is Administrator Expert. I put the question on the stage. I think that you can.
Yeah, so how is threading handled in Gam? What is the API consumption per call? Are there any best practices for limiting the number of calls an API makes when running a command? So I would say that those are pretty much in the weeds questions. Gam can do threading sometimes, especially in older versions. As I mentioned, it can work on multiple computers. So sometimes if I'm doing something that I want to lower the amount of time, I will run it on multiple computers. Sometimes I'll even create multiple superadmin accounts so I can not hit API calls. So if I have an installation with, say, 400,000 users and I've got to do something, I will, use multiple computers. I will use, and I will create other accounts to get around API type of issues. Those are real issues. Google does have API call issues. I don't know that I have any best practices on limiting them. For the most part, Google's pretty good on not running them, but I would recommend you talk to the user group about that particular issue, especially if you have a particular issue that comes up. So, and I love your username, by the way.
Okay, thank you so much. And we have any questions. This is the question. I think that you can see. Yes.
So I don't know what a bear token is, but you can definitely copy the auth files, and that .gam directory can be copied to multiple computers. So I don't know exactly what you mean when you say a web app version of Gam, but for example, I use, we spin up instances on GCP that have Gam for specific clients so that we never install Gam on our local machines. We always install it up in the cloud on a machine that's dedicated for that client. So there's never a risk of leakage or anything with a particular laptop, for example, and we run it there. So then we use RDC. I'm not sure if that's really what you mean when you say a web app version, but that is how we run things. Sorry.
Oh, well, okay. I don't know if administrator experts want to say something more about this, but it seems that there are no more questions. Okay, and
well, I can go back for a few minutes to the live demo. So if that's okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you guys hopefully should be able to see my screen. I'll go ahead and bring back this screen over here. So one of the things we did forget to do is I did forget to output showing all the scopes passed. So you do have to manually open the browser. I did skip that command, but you also saw that it took a few minutes to take effect. But the nice part is that now I can do check update. Instead of update, I can do the check service account. And now I can see that Gam user K McGrail and all of it passes. And so now I can do things like Gam list users, and you can see that Gam will go ahead and talk to this particular one, and you'll see that, oh, we have users at McGrail.com is one of the entity. We can also, if we go back to our particular, our use cases that we have, some use cases, we can do, like, for example, Gam info user kevin.mcgrail at mcgrail.com. So you can see this is now on a different domain, and that's working. And you can also do crazier things, like, for example, I showed you the .gam.old. So let's go ahead and rename .gam. This usually works. I haven't done it for this particular version, but I'm going to rename Gam to .gam.mcgrail, and I'll rename .gam old to .gam. And we should now be basically running the other installation that activates a different workspace installation. And let's go run our command. And over on this one, it was kmcgrail at documentshare.com. So you can see I've jumped to a different domain that I administer. And we can go ahead and run the command. And because all of the files are stored in that, the command works. So I hope to some extent you guys are now all ready for how to use Gam, how to get it installed, and start to explore the power that it gives you on monitoring and administering your Google Apps workspaces. So I am now done, Andrea.
Yes, we have another question from Cofeiro. I don't know how to pronounce that, but is this question?
Okay, so I recently segregated my admin role to an admin account for my personal Google account. Is there a best way to clean up many of the Gam projects in my personal account safely? One of the things you can do is if you go in and just delete that .gam directory, the information is gone forever. You won't have unless you went back into the admin panel and got those OAuth and the client secrets and the client ID, that information would be gone. So the .gam directory would solve that problem. As you just saw, I renamed it specifically to split between two different installations. So that's where everything's there. The other thing I can tell you that I like doing is Workspace includes a product called Cloud Identity Free. So as a principle of least privilege, you don't have to pay for Cloud Identity Free, hence free in the name. What we do is we deploy all superadmins with Cloud Identity Free, and then the normal day-to-day usage is a normal account. And that way you don't have the day-to-day account that's being used all the time has superadmin privileges, and you're not paying for an extra license. So a lot of places are very sensitive on the costs, and so this is a great way to have free superadmin accounts and have that principle of least privilege. So I hope that answers it, Keith.
Okay, thank you so much for the questions. There are no more questions, I think. Okay, and first of all, thank you so much, Keith, Kevin, for staying here with us. It's a big pleasure to have you in this webinar. And we hope to see you in another webinar and in Open Expo Virtual Experience, of course, if you want.
Absolutely. No, I've always enjoyed it, and thank you for having me. I hope you guys find some value. And again, here's the link for me on LinkedIn. And thank you from me, and if anybody out there needs help with Google Workspace administration or Google Cloud Platform, please reach out to me. Dido does that for a living, and we're a premier partner with Google and love helping and solving problems in Google.
Okay, thank you so much, and bye-bye.
Bye.